Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 141 of the podcast. Today is Friday, November 8th, 2024, as I record this. And today we're talking to Leslie Shreve about Taskology, her methodology for being as productive as you possibly can in any given day. We talk about what that method looks like, what Taskology even means, and how thinking linearly can help you be more productive from a day-to-day basis. Talk about not losing things in the cracks, not forgetting things as you write them down, make note to do them. It's a very good conversation for myself, someone who doesn't write a lot of things down. It's not something that I'm strong at, but I'm getting better. And the conversation helped me to analyze my days and determine, hey, how can I be more productive? So if you want to stick around for this conversation, it's very insightful, and Leslie has 20 years worth of experience in training people on it. So definitely an expert there on that front. So in terms of the podcast, I'm really happy with the new schedule so far. So publishing on Monday seems to be working better for myself. I know it's a little bit of a change for some of you who might have been excited to have a Wednesday podcast. I'm just kind of matching a lot of other podcasts, but there's something about the weekend, giving myself some extra grace and time to edit that podcast. At the beginning of the week, just wasn't happening. There's just so much going on. So I think it's going to be very positive moving forward. I mentioned this on my last podcast, but I am separating my email list from my author email list to the podcast. I was just identifying, or I just noticed that most people that were subscribing to my email list for my author were uninterested in the podcast. And that's fine. That doesn't offend me. Different audiences, maybe different preferences and what type of content they consume. So I stood up a new email list for my podcast. So it's just, if you go to thecasualauthor.com, there's going to be a button there that says subscribe to the email list. There's nothing that's going to be sent to you today, but I am working on something. So it's going to be a little nonfiction piece, and it probably won't be a full-length novel. It'll probably just be like a short guide, maybe 3 to 5 page PDF, which is pretty much outlining how I get more done with what little time I have. I get the question all the time, hey, you've got homesteading, you've got a full-time job, you've got authoring, you've got other responsibilities, religious responsibilities, all these things. How are you possibly still making progress on writing? So I'm just going to jot down some things about how it's actually happening, right? Make that a little bit more concrete. It's probably going to be 5 to 7 steps or 5 to 7 things that I consider day to day to help myself stay productive and moving forward on my authoring. So that will come eventually. If you subscribe to the email list before that's completed, I'll make sure to send it out to you when it is done. So don't worry about that. I'll probably send a bi-weekly email with the email list just so you know what the episode was, who I spoke with, and maybe other tips and tricks that I've learned from listening to other podcasts. So sign up for that if you want to keep track of what's going on with the podcast, or you can just keep coming back and listening every week. That works as well. But in terms of the podcasting as well, I'm trying to shift my strategy a little bit more. I have a foray into X as an application. I've been on it for years, but I've done absolutely nothing with it. I had a great conversation with another great author friend of mine, and he said, in terms of connecting, creating a community, meeting other authors, X is a really good platform for that, for podcasting. So I figured, hey, why not? Let's give it a go. I've actually mostly been in TikTok and Instagram to meet other authors, and I think those work to some degree, but X is a special place for that type of community and author building, relationship building. So we decided to give it a go. A little bit weird, not used to text only based things. I know you can do pictures and videos, but most of it is just, short text. So it should be interesting. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, if it doesn't work out, I won't worry too much about it. It seems to be less time consuming than something like TikTok, which can suck you in so easily. In any case, yeah, if you want to follow me on X, you should find me, author Dan Kenner. I haven't started a casual author podcast one. I'm not sure if I ever will, because that one seems to be more based on author to author connections, and I don't want to be behind the casual author podcast kind of hidden there. We'll see if I change my strategy at some point, but the plan is to leave it there. But in terms of homesteading, so last week I talked a little bit about it, but winterizing. I'm back to work this week. The week last week I was at the end of my PTO. The winterizing process was incomplete. I didn't get everything done. There's some kind of gotchas that came out of nowhere that we weren't prepared for in terms of freezing waters. All of our animals have to have water and food daily, and it gets really cold here. It freezes. So we upgraded last year with the chicken water. We got a one that you plug in, keeps them from freezing, which is it was amazing. Prior to that, I was carrying 5 gallon buckets of hot water out twice a day, and it would freeze, and then I'd bring out a new one, and it was a whole mess. But yeah, the waters that don't freeze are great. I did get a little heating mechanism to just submerge into the cow and goats big trough. So I think it's a 50-gallon trough that we have. It's not huge. You can buy 100, 200, 500-gallon ones. Ours is just about 50 gallons. And yeah, just drop that heater in there, plug it in, and it keeps it from freezing at night. So that's really nice. The one downside, and this is the kind of gotcha we were not prepared for, is that I was anticipating, oh, no big deal. Our hydrant is a little bit far. It's a non-freeze hydrant outside. So pretty much it drains below the ground to keep it from freezing at night or just when it gets cold. I was planning on just hooking up a hose every day and dragging it the 100 feet to the trough, turning it on, and then turning it off, and then draining the hose and rolling it up and putting it away. Well, the idea is great, except when it gets so cold, that thing freezes in 5 minutes, right? And if you know frozen hoses, you can't roll that thing up. And if you try to roll it up, it's gonna snap. It just becomes really brittle. And I don't know why I thought using a hose, even for just 5 to 10 minutes, would be not that big of a deal, right? The water underground is warm. It's cool because it's ground level temperature, but that's not going to keep the hose from not freezing. So I broke a hose. That was the gotcha. It was fine. It was an older one, but I was trying to roll it up and ooh, it snapped right in half. So it was only out for 5 minutes. That being said, still coming up with a great solution for delivering water from the hydrant, which is about 120 feet away from the trough to the trough. I think what I'm doing for now is just carrying buckets. Now I know that sounds awful, but when you have a couple 5 gallon buckets, I'm working with a 40-gallon trough. Realistically, I just need to carry 2 or 3 of those from the hydrant to the trough. So I get some exercise every day. I'll just fill it up morning and night. I'll carry 2 to 3 5 gallon buckets, either one at a time or two at a time, and it'll only take 5 to 10 minutes. So not a huge deal. Now I may change my mind when I'm trudging through feet of snow. For now, we'll give it a go. It's been working just fine. It's better than breaking every hose that I own, which we have a lot of hoses. The long story there. So yeah, other than that, the other update that was not a fun update, and I don't think I talked about this last week, but our cow's milk plummeted in the past week and a half, which is something we were not prepared for. The weather dropped, it got cold, and her milk just tanked. I'm talking cutting less than half within a week. And I suspected that when the weather got cold, her milk would decline, and that's just by nature of her body, right? She needs to consume more of those resources that hay to warm her body, and that's fine. But I didn't expect it to drop so much. And so it was kind of alarming, right? We were watching every milking that we did. We were losing cups, quarts at a time, it was just disappearing. She was not producing as much. We were giving her more food and trying other things. We talked to some other people, and they said, "Yeah, that's not normal, right? Either she's sick, or maybe she's consumed something that will kill her." That's not good news to hear. In any case, we talked to some vets, talked to some other people, and determined that it was just a perfect storm of lots of things that affected her. Right? It got cold. We had to change where she was staying. I built a new structure for her. She was bred, which means we had an unfamiliar bull on our property. He was kind of harassing her. It's not much you can do there. He wasn't mean, but he was, for lack of a better term, a determined bull who wanted to breed her. So he was a little bit aggressive. In any case, it was a combination of all these things, which I think stressed out her body, and she just got so stressed out that her milk dropped. We did some measures to try hopefully help her relieve some of that stress and calm down after all of these changes. And it does seem to have worked. In the past couple of days, it has gone up slightly, which is better. It's been going down every day until just yesterday. And now we see it bump up just a little, which is encouraging. Will it get back to where she was 2 weeks ago? Definitely not, because it's not warm anymore. But it's relieving that we're not going to be out of milk completely. It was going down so fast, we were afraid in a week we would have nothing because we'd be feeding everything to the calf. So that's good. little bit of a scare there. We're not experienced with cows. Our goat's milk has never dropped that much when it got cold, maybe a little bit, but not this much. So that's why we were a little bit alarmed. We were nervous that she was sick or something, but no issues there. So yeah, let's see. I'm trying to think of what else on the homestead other than winterizing, preparing for the cold. The cold's already here. I don't know why I keep saying preparing for the snow is really what we're preparing for. Picking up the leaves. So I've talked about this before, but we have a lot of big trees. The leaves fall, and those are perfect for helping us save money. If you have chickens, if you have goats, cows, any animal that has bedding, that needs bedding in their house to help deal with the manure, and other bodily fluids, right? Soaking it up is important so that their house stays fresh. Now we do the deep litter method, which essentially you just add bedding every week or every day or however often, depending on the animal, and it just builds up over there 4 to 6 months. And then when it warms up in the spring, I do a full clean out. It is my least favorite day of the year, but it's important to do. So the leaves are perfect bedding, right? It's free minus the labor and gas of picking it up with our lawnmower. But if we can gather as many bags of leaves from these trees, these fallen leaves, as possible, then, a big old bag, I put one in the chicken coop every week and it'll keep it fresh. They love it too. They'll pick at it, they'll kick it around. It smells a little fresher too, as well, more fresh than manure, that's for sure. But yeah, I've been picking up the leaves, trying to get them before the wind blows away into our neighbor's yard. There's a history there, but we won't go there. Let's see. I think that's everything in terms of the homestead updates. Uh, in terms of authoring, I'm trying to plug along with the writing every day in the morning. I haven't been able to hit 5 o'clock a.m. every morning, but I've done a pretty decent job. I don't worry too much about word count. I'm not doing NaNoWriMo. I know there's a lot of authors that do NaNoWriMo. Nothing against you. I just find that NaNoWriMo detracts. It prevents me from being as creative. I love the being able to say, I'm going to do this many minutes in seat writing. I try to hit an hour per day. And whatever word count I get, I'm happy with. I don't worry too much about that. I tend to hit much higher word counts. So I'm pouring all of my attention into book 4 of the Hidden Heritage series. And once again, this is a 6-book series. They're all first person POV, but each book is from a different point of view of the 6 different teenagers in this, half-bloods, so to speak. They're standing on the line between the human realm and this mystical realm called Khotan. And yeah, this is the perspective of Jared. If you've read Dragon Blood, you know what that means. But he is this big old Samoan kid who is actually half fairy. So yes, it's intended to be a little comical, but he's big. He's got blonde hair, blue eyes, very unusual because his mom is a fairy and his dad is Samoan. So it's been a blast to write that story. He's been a character from the beginning, but now I get to write from his perspective. The one thing that does make it even more interesting is it's established in the first book. This isn't a spoiler or anything. It is established that this half fairy can read minds. And so when you're in first person POV and he's traveling, he's in the human realm or wherever he is in Khotan, he can read people's minds inadvertently. He doesn't have to try. It's just like he's constantly hearing people's thoughts. It's just like noise to him. So writing that has been fun. It's been very interesting and challenging knowing that he's got this constant influx of other people's thoughts and how distracting that might be and how he deals with it. So yeah, it's been fun. I love the challenge of that and I'm looking forward to flourishing it out. I'm at about 15,000 words now on that book. So kind of slow moving, but I write about 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. Can't complain. That's a decent clip for a book. But yeah, I believe that's everything in terms of author updates. As a reminder, I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Comment on the YouTube channel or on Spotify or wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts. Let me know where you're listening. I discovered that there was someone else in Idaho, in a different part of Idaho, who's also an author and homesteads. So that's, if you're listening today, thank you for commenting. It's so cool to hear that. I love to realize that I'm not the only homestead author out there. I'd love to share some stories and hear about your experience, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one experiencing this. I know I'm not, but yeah, I would love to hear your perception and perspective. Additionally, if you'd like to support the show, I have a Patreon, thecasualauthor.com/Patreon. You've heard this before. For a couple dollars a month, you can support me. There's no extra content that's coming out today as I try to ramp things up and transition a little bit more lean more into the podcast. I do hope to provide more helpful content, helpful videos about processes that I have, systems and tools that I use and whatnot, but we're not there quite yet. So it's up to you. Otherwise, I appreciate any support and listens you have. So thanks for listening today. We'll go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with Leslie. Hey, Leslie, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm thrilled to be able to pick your brain and learn from your many years of experience on productivity and efficiency. So I'm
Happy to
excited to
be
dive
here.
into
Thanks
that.
so much.
So
Yeah.
before we get into that, you've written a book, correct? That you've published. I'm going to learn a little bit about that first. How long have you been writing and publishing?
That was my only book so far, and I have a plan to write my second book in starting in early 2025. I already have it mapped out. I already have it in my head. I've got the structure. I just have a few projects to wrap up before the end of 24 before I can dive into that, but it is on the list. So I'm excited
Nice.
about that. Yeah.
Very, very, very cool. So what's the story with this first book that you published? It's been out for a little while, but how does that connect with your business history since you've been running this business for just over 20 years, correct?
That's right. That's right. So I started in 2003. And when I created and trademarked the system that I teach called Taskology, the science done, that was way back in 2010. Now, the whole time, the whole 20 years, I've been doing private one-to-one consulting with C-level executives, folks in corporate, and then business owners. So that's really the backbone of the whole business. But I also downloaded from my brain all of the asset for Taskology. I created PDF of the whole. I created a whole video system. And so by the time 2016 or 2015 rolled around, I had a book idea in my head. So I went ahead and wrote a fiction book. So it's a business fiction
Okay.
that takes the reader through the process that my clients go. So lead in the book, his name is Jim. He is sort of all put together, like take all of my clients and put them together in one character. And he kind of represents what my clients go through first when they discover productive day and then talk with me and decide they want to learn Taskology and then what they learn. Now, of course, we couldn't cram everything into the book. So it is not 100% everything that someone know, but it is a representation and it's got some really great strategies from Taskology to that are imparted, of course, on Jim as he learns the system, so the reader can learn alongside him some of what in Taskology. So that story takes him from the very beginning, where he's on vacation but still tied up at work in his head and on his phone, and they're at the beach and his wife is like, aren't you coming out to the beach to
Hmm.
play with the kids, when are you going to join us, kind of thing, because they're with another family, and he's got things blowing up at work. So it takes him through learning Taskology, and by the end of the book he takes another vacation, and this time unplug, relax. He has everything dialed before he leaves, and when he comes back, he does not have to deal with some horrible re. So it's a fiction that kind of takes you from start to finish, so that the reader can understand not only what some of the strategies are at productive day, but also what the benefits are and why Jim's a changed man with a transformed workday by the time the story.
Very cool. And what a very effective way to deliver that, like a living story type. A living story is often used as a description of a story that has very clear messaging and morals behind it. The opposite would be twaddle, but it's really cool that, I expected it to be more of like a nonfiction kind of self-help type format book, but that is in fiction format is very, very interesting.
What you're describing is our PDF, which was originally back in 2010 about 550 with
Oh,
a wide
goodness.
right side margin. Yeah. And now it's on its fifth edition. We don't even sell that product on the website anymore, but I have it. So it's now down to a tidy 330 pages now, fifth edition, because I'm always revising it to follow along with what I change as I go through the years. So 5 times I've revised that. I'm on actually sixth one now because I came out with a new version called Taskology for any technology, because the
Hmm.
original version for Microsoft out, even
Hmm.
though it can be used in many other places, I hadn't actually written AF or done any videos for everything else. So as I revise that and create it for any technology coming six, that's the one
Very
that's got
cool.
me.
That is very impressive, and I go ahead and commend you on that revision process to reduce that many pages. I mean, editing is not my favorite thing to do, but that's quite
It
some
does take
edits.
some time. Yes, it takes some time.
So I want to talk a little bit about productivity because this is something that everybody is, whether or not they're familiar with it in a positive or negative way, they're familiar with it, right? We all have our struggles with productivity. Everyone has their own pitfalls. But I'm curious to know for you, kind of what is the biggest struggle you see with people when it comes to
The
productivity?
biggest struggle is when they're suffering from certain things in their workday, the processes where time and productivity hiding,
Hmm.
where the time is like leaking out of their workday because of the process. They're in processes they expect. So think of, oh, I time. I think first about the calendar and how they're managing their time or time blocking or anything related to that. And then they're not really realizing that email process, task management process, information management process are the three processes really time from day. So that's one of the first things I think people are struggling with, even though they wouldn't know how to put their finger on that. They just know that their workday isn't working the way they want it, and they get frustrated because they're looking things they know they have can't find, or they're dealing with email and they're trying to hit, it's like hitting baseballs out of a batting, just like hitting those emails one at a time, like, oh my god, am I ever at the end of this, and then not really planning and prioritizing. I think one of the other biggest struggles that I see is that people are still using paper to manage things. What I mean, of course, is that to-do list on the legal pad, spiral pad, notebook, post-it note, steno pad, whiteboard, Excel spreadsheet, Word document, using any kind of paper, or even a planner, by the way. Any kind of paper is archaic, and it's really hold back. And so creating that to-do list on paper, blocks them from actually understanding how to plan and prioritize the action steps. And by the way, it's a partial, that's not everything. So they end up sort of spinning their wheels because they both, they have a to-do list on paper maybe, but then they've got file on their desk as a reminder. They've got emails that they're probably flat. And then they've got all these other sources in their day coming at you from all sides. It's coming from meetings and hallway social media, and it's coming from email and phone calls and texts now, instant messaging, name it, coming at you all the time. But when you create a list under that becomes, you filled it up with stuff. So now what people are trying to do is remember the most important thing in each of those locations. And then they're trying to plan and prioritize in their head. And that's when things start. So they feel it. They know that by the end of the day, they're like, don't know what I accomplished today, but I think I did something, and they get a little frustrated. I'm sure they accomplished something, but is it what they wanted? And did they go as far as did they feel like they were working in the zone and that they knocked it out of the park? A lot of times they're going home not feeling that way, feeling more deflated than anything. And then they're like, well, I'm going to put together my evening plan because when the kids go to bed, I'm going to whip open the laptop and catch up on tap. And that's why I want to help.
I am so okay. I'm fascinated by this idea because I am actually, I always have been rather, it was kind of an unconscious bias toward task listing. And I could never put a finger on why I hated it. I've never been a task list person. I was been like, that just doesn't work for me. I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. And my wife is a task person, was not a negative view of it. And she keeps trying to get me to put it on proverbial paper. I don't use paper because I will lose it so fast. So there's not even worth it. I do digital format of them, quotation marks. But it's always been this thing. It's just like I don't like it. It doesn't help me. It stresses me out more than anything. And so to hear you say that, I'm just like, you're the first person I think I've ever talked to that agrees with me on that. But I want to learn a little bit more about why. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I do want to just kind of validate what you said around the completing tasks, checking things off the list, and getting to the end of the day and thinking, I didn't do anything. I can't even tell you the number of times I come up from work. I work from home. Super blessed. I'm very grateful for that. I come upstairs and my wife's like, I didn't do anything today. I just did these 15 things. I'm like, you literally just said you did all of these things. I'm confused. What do you mean you didn't do anything? Right. And I think you're right. It's just this idea of almost like directionless, like almost purposeless things that aren't moving you in your life direction. And I think she feels that a lot. I don't feel it as much because I don't know, maybe it's because I don't use a task list. I have no idea. But so I want to talk a little bit about that because when it comes to prioritization and you mentioned taking lists and taking it in your brain and prioritizing, that's when things fall through the cracks. What do you recommend as an alternative to a written task list?
So the fact that you're using something in a digital format, what is it that you're using exactly? You are using a digital approach to managing things. What's your go?
I think that's my biggest problem is I don't have a specific go-to tool. I have a number of them that I've attempted out. I don't really like task-based checklist type things. I prefer almost like broad docs, like a Google Doc type thing in
Okay.
terms of vision and tracking. But that's generally what I've used.
Okay. So even when you're using a digital approach and you're listing out things that you want to accomplish, still leaning towards a task, you might not be calling it that.
Yeah.
So anybody who's using a digital tool like Asana or Trello, you go on and on with those, or they might be using something in Microsoft or some whatever. All of those can be task lists. Now in Taskology, ours is proprietary because the methodology technology. So let's say someone buys a new tool and they get all excited about Asana or Trello or whatever, and they're thinking, this has got to be it. Like, I've been searching and searching, and I really want something that I love and that I could use every day and be on track. The challenge is understanding how to apply it, how to make it work exactly for what you're trying. The challenge is also that they have so many bells, colors, and categories and projects and tasks. God, you go down so many rabbit holes on this thing, and I'm thinking, people, it is not that complicated. And I'm not criticizing the people. I'm not criticizing the tool, but I'm saying you guys are overcomplicating, all of you, like everybody making these things. So when the people giving the demo, it always makes me chuckle, because the people giving the demo on one of say, well, you could put your task here and it's a project. Dude, that's a project. That's not a task. That's huge. That's a multi-step thing. And so it's leading people down these long, dark, dead-end hallways where they're not really getting an idea of what task really. So what I teach people is some people are not learning out. Nobody else. What is a task? We have a 5-step formula that really outlines, well, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, what it is, what I'm going to do it, how long it should take, and all of that. And it's not rigid at all. It's just a framework that people really, because how else are you going to decide this is what's going to fit in this day, instead of trying to do all of this, this big bucket to do when you have this tiny thimble of time and they're never going to match up. So in order to be able to get that task time aligned, you've got to have a better target. You've got to have a better frame. So when people try to use tools, they go down these rabbit holes of going, oh, well, I'm going to do what they tell me. I'm going to name my project, and then I'm going to pick all the tasks, come up with subtasks and all this stuff. So before you know it, they're trying to fill all the fields when really it doesn't require all that. And I really feel for people. I'm like, oh, I spent all that time doing all this, and you really don't need to, because I'm telling everybody, like all the listeners today, hear me when I say the only know are what am I going to do and when am I going to, that's it. Like, yes, we're going to get into prioritization, and, we get into prioritizing from day to day and within a day and all that kind of stuff. But just to start out for personal productivity, that's all you see. And I think some of these things are projects, but for personal productivity, it does not need to be all that. So I feel for really losing time, and then they find productive day and they say, gosh, I've wasted so much time trying to make a tool work for me, trying to set it up and fill it in and everything. And I spent more time on the system than I did on my work to do it. And then that causes stop.
Yeah.
Either that or they end up getting complex, taking too long, taking longer than I thought. I don't know how to do this. They hit up against a wall. They have nobody to ask. Stop.
This is very interesting. So you'd be interested to know for my professional career, I'm actually an operations person. So
Mhm.
efficiency and that's my thing. But coincidentally, I'm with you on the same page. At work we use Asana. I don't care for it that much,
Okay.
frankly.
Yeah.
I don't really use it the same way. From my authoring perspective, I don't really use anything. Like I have some notes documents that I do just to remind myself of things I need to look into later, but I don't really use a task list at all. What I generally, and whether or not this is the correct way to do it, and from your business standpoint, generally what I do is when I'm looking at my day or my week, I see what available time I have and say like, okay, let's be realistic about what I would like to happen, right? Here are these three things, right? And oh yeah, I could probably fit that in on Monday. I could probably fit that in on Tuesday, but I don't always specifically say when during the day. I just know that by the end of the day, I'm going to do it. And I do. I never fail on that, right? Because
Right.
sometimes you have to shuffle things around. You've got calls, things, kids need diaper changes, like stuff happens. But,
Mhm.
I set mentally, this is what I want to do on this day, and I do it. And that's for both my authoring career and my business or my full-time career. So
Right.
that's
Right.
how I operate things. I don't like over engineering things. And
Mhm.
I'm often pulling the rest of my team back and saying, I don't think that's worth it. One, I'm colorblind, so don't color
Mhm.
code anything. That's not going to help me. Second of
Right.
all, I agree on the wasted effort in building the infrastructure that's never going to support what actually needs to happen. It feels like
Yes.
wasted effort to me. And
Yes.
so project planners and I will sometimes butt heads, not in a negative way, where I'll say like, this is great and all, but we could have been building for the past 2 weeks, but instead we've been talking about what we need to build. And I feel like we just wasted 2 weeks, right? Because we're going to do it anyway. So why did
Right.
we have to write it all down in this complicated step-by-step pattern? So
Right? Yeah, and you're on the right track, because I think when we start filling up their calendar with putting tasks on there, that's also problematic. Even though you might be looking at the calendar and saying, "Oh yeah, I've got plenty of time. I can do these things," but not actually putting them on there, which some people do. In corporate, you can't really. Well, actually, we don't do that at all.
depends. Yeah.
Taskology, because a task goes on a task list.
Right.
Literal appointments go on a calendar, like where you have time committed.
Right.
So a lot of entrepreneurs like big time blocks on the calendar. This is my day for podcasts. This is my day for writing. A lot of entrepreneurs can totally do that. They can't do that in corporate. Corporate has way too many, as you know, way too many meetings.
Yes.
So
Yep.
we do have a time blocking methodology in Taskology, but the tasks go on the task list. And you're right, you don't want to have a rigid system for that, because your day is always changing. Priorities are always shifting, especially when you're in, a busy business, a busy job, a busy career, what have you. You have to be able to turn on a dime, but without missing getting anything. So
Right.
to go back to one of your earlier questions, you said, what does this task look like? We have right now, most people, I got Microsoft out. They are in corp stuff and I love it, but I've been using it for 30, but it does work in other systems like Todoist or, Apple, Microsoft for an Apple or Mac. And you could do some Google Queues. I mean, whatever you got, it can work. You know what I mean? But when you build it, we're building it with everything that's on your plate. And a lot of people think, well, my to-do list is really just about what I'm doing. But that's not so. We really build it out. So it's infinite of everything that's on your plate, whether you're going to do it today or next week or next month, or it's a follow-up. So it's a complete infinity of every want, dream, just not all in one day. It's all in one system. So my clients have anywhere from 20 or 30 tasks all the way up to 106, but they're spread out. There's a limit to how many plan in a day. And that's because of the time limitation. That's where we have that task time connect. So we're going for a very small number of very important tasks. And the reason they know that they're going to do this today and that next week is because once you have all these tasks in mission control, then you've got complete awareness, total clarity of what's on your plate. And then it's easy. Well, I got to do this today. That's going to have tomorrow or next month or whatever. So when you have that clarity, that's what makes, so it isn't just what do I want to do today? If you could picture, your desk at work, just like everybody else who's got a job in corporate. And if you're not, you could be working from home or working from the office. People have stuff all over the desk sometimes, the Post-it notes, the big pads, little pads, spiral pads, notepads, Post-it notes, white, stuff in email, notes from phone calls, notes from meetings, and so it's kind of all spread out. What we want to do is make that. So the very first day when I work with clients, all of that, I do it virtual, but I'm talking through, let's find your action steps, because a lot of people leave stuff out on the desk as a reminder, and that's going to be papers, files, post that. And then you do have the planner or the legal pad written. All of that goes away. You want to consolidate it so that it is in one place that becomes mission control, so that you can compare and contrast, respond smart about how to time. Once you decide, everything gets an action. So it's not about due dates, it's about, so every task gets an action date. You have to, like you say, it can't be rigid, but we have to have a target. We have to start somewhere. So with everything that everybody knows right now, like this is what I know today, this is my plan. Is it going to change? Yes, it's going to change rapid and often. So that's when I say, you want to have it digital so that you can make quick adjustments and go, okay, this is going to have to wait now because this thing just came up and it's hot and I got to change my mind, so you have to, so not procrastinating, reprioritize. And you have to have an easy way to do that. And because it's all already there, you don't have to be writing and rewriting to-do lists or anything. No, it's all right there. It's all digital. You just shift things around. And of course, in Microsoft, it takes only a second. There's some really quick ways. In other systems, a little more cumbersome, but it's okay. At least it's digital and at least it's all right there. It's their mind and in an instant. So easy to keep up with your ever-changing day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually curious because for someone like, you and myself who there's a number of things that we're working on. I've got my author business, my career, I've got family life, got a number of other personal objectives that I'd like to accomplish. You do recommend putting all of those, regardless of disparate location, in one place, even though they're related to different parts of your life.
Oh, are you talking about the difference between business and personal?
Yeah. Do you have different lists for each of the facets of your life, or is it all in one place for everything?
Great question. Okay. The answer to that question is that let's say you're going to do something within your business day, which let's say it's 8 to 5. I'm making that up. It's a little different for everybody, when they start this day and when they end. So if it's say between 8 and 5, and you know that you have to call the dentist for your son or your daughter and make an appointment, go ahead and put that on your task list for the day with all your other business stuff. Why? Well, because it takes a few minutes out of your day. So if you're trying to see what's going to fit between 8 and 5, you have to have everything represented there, because all these little things are going to take time, whether it's 5 or 20 or whatever. So you're going to want to put it there because you don't want to be looking in like a gazillion different lists for what you're going to do. So there's no categorization whatsoever in Taskology. Don't recommend it at all. So don't be looking like, oh, I've got this call list and this my podcast list and then my book authoring list and then my family list and all. No, if you're going to do something today, you have to have a bird's eye view of what you're trying to do in today's time. And that's why it all goes together. And then of course we have a way to prioritize, like what are your revenue generating tasks versus, this is my regular routine task that I do every week, or the it would be nice kind of thing. And then if you have ideas for personal life, by the way, like, oh, I'd like to end, or, oh, I've got things to talk about with my wife, that does go on a separate person because that's not actionable today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about that because a number of tasks, when you're looking at task versus project versus like goal, broader spectrum, I mean, you're looking at some things that may take 6 months to accomplish, some things that will take 5 minutes, right?
That's a project. That's different. See, in our system, we're boiling everything down first or next action step. So
Sure.
yeah, if you're talking about a business business project, writing a book, that's a project, let's redo the website, let's whatever it is, hire a person, like those are all projects. So we don't do project management here in Taskology, not at Productive Day. It's all about task management. So this is the framework I was talking about before, where we're talking about, what is a task?
Mhm.
So this is, I think, where people get very confused. Like, well, if you're listing things out on a legal pad, and I see this in the beginning before my clients learn Taskology, talk through, okay, hey, John, what's on your legal pad? Let's start there because we're going to start building the Taskology task list. And they start reading things off to me. And I'm like, John, that's a project. Let's talk about that for a minute. What are you really going to do first to get that started? And so I have sort of an exercise of talking through, this is what the consulting is all about, really boiling it down. Like if you were going to do that today, what
Mhm.
is that task?
Sure. And you don't recommend necessarily for projects writing out the full task list because it's going to change anyway, right?
No, never get
Most
out your
likely.
crystal ball. No, no. And this is where people do go down that rabbit hole. Let's say they're using Asana, and they're trying to fill up every field. And because of that project, task, subtask thing, then they try to get out their crystal ball and go, okay, well, I know this project is going to have a lot of steps. Think about all the things that this is going to entail. No, no. First step, next step. That's all you need to know. No, just stop, just let it unfold. Now, if you do happen to know, I totally know I have to 3 things. Like that's at least what I know. And I might end up with 20 more steps I have to take until this finishes in February, 3 months from now. Sure. Make a note of the thing you know about, but don't try to make up the rest. Just let it unfold. Let it unfold.
I mean, that works for me. I love that type of living, and I honestly most of the time run my life that way. So
Yes,
that sounds like it's music to my ears. But I
it's
know that's hard
simple.
for some people who are controlled, like they feel like they need their control over everything. So yeah, that's the one thing my wife and I do differ on that. She'll try and get me to sit down and write down the task list of every single thing possible, like from beginning to end over the next year of what needs to happen. I was just like, I don't can't. Like one, I don't want to. Two, I don't think I
Oh,
can.
okay, yeah, that's a little different. Like she's trying to think like what are all the things we need to do with the house and what are all the things we need to do with the kids and yeah, some of those things are just going to pop up. Now, if you
Mhm.
happen to have them in your brain, well, sure, download them from your brain, get them on a list somewhere and then break that down into, okay, so if we're going to do this thing on the house, where are we going to start? Like what's the first thing? Yeah, okay, that's fine. But trying to just like imagine it can be kind of challenged when really that's not on the forefront right now.
Right.
You already have the biggies, the big goals right now. And I totally know what you're talking. Yeah.
Yep. So they're a little different, tangible versus intangible things, right? I don't really like to live in the intangible because I know what needs to happen. So plus
Exactly.
I think that a lot of it comes down to trust. I think more people need to have trust in themselves
Yes.
to be able
Agreed.
to problem solve and also
Yes.
be okay with flexibility, just being flexible, being okay with change. I know a lot
Being
of people
okay
are
with
resistant to
ambiguity.
change. Yeah.
Ambiguity and that things will change. And this is why I think having, something like a task list that you could really count on, because once you do fill it up with everything you are aware of
Hmm.
and you pull them all away from all the sources, like they're not going to sit in email, they're not going to sit on the desk, they don't have to be in voicemail, get them off the texting, out of
Hmm.
social, whatever, pull them away from the source, get them here. Now they're all vanilla. They're in an
Yeah.
inventory. Doesn't matter where they came from anymore. Now you get to compare and contrast them, but when things change and things are a little less ambiguous, excuse me, you at least have this platform to keep you straight and
Mhm.
keep track, and that's what you can trust.
So I'm curious to know your take on product prioritization. I mean, obviously, it's going to look a little different for everybody. Everyone has different goals and expectations in life and different experiences. But I think I'm curious to know what your take on prioritization is once you have this centralized list. Let's say you're looking at just today's task list. Let's say you have a list of a bunch of things you know need to happen, whether or not they have due dates. You said everything should have a due date. So let's assume everything has a
Do
DO date,
do.
right? A
Yeah, a
DO
do. That's
date.
right. That's right.
Clarify that. A DO
Yeah.
date,
Mhm.
then, how do you reprioritize? Like, how do you look at that list for today and account for change?
Right. So as I mentioned before, there is a limit to how many tasks plan on a day. So you're not trying 10 or 20 things. It's way too many. Given the people that have the meetings and the calls and networking events and lunches and all kinds of things scheduled. Plus, they have to be prepared for the unexpected, be
Mm-hmm.
flexible, prepared to talk to your team at the last, talk to a boss or whatever. You're going to have some flex space. You don't want to be booked up. We do have the time blocking Taskology. We have time blocks in the day that are specifically meant for working on tasks or processing email, even working on a special project, but we don't name it. It's like something general, but we have time protected for those really important process tasks. So when you're looking at your task list and you have a limit to how many tasks you're really trying to say, it's 5. So you've got this list and you've got today at the top of the whole thing, and then tomorrow and the next, all of these days have very few tasks. You don't want to be all bunched up like, oh, I don't need to do that till the new year, so I've got like 30 tasks or 40 or 50 sitting on January 1st. No, do that. Don't do that. Make them all like hit a target day. And by the way, if there are true deadlines or due dates on some, you want to keep that. You want to put that in the task, end of the task, in print, deadline, December. So everything's got an action date. So when your day changes, you're going to just pick a new act that makes more sense. Now you're adding, because you're always adding, more is always coming at you. Keep adding things. And then as you take action steps, you're going to rephrase those tasks. Okay, I called Bob. We talked about that. Now I've got something else I got to do that came out of that call. Rephrase it, pick a new action, moving on, right? Do the next most important task of the day. But when something changes, you have to be able to pick a new action. And if you end up overloading like that other day that you're kick something off of that one. It shouldn't be a lot of moving things around. That's why you want to keep all the days pretty light. You're already maxed out, a week from now. Well, now you're going to have the headache of maintenance on the list. And you never, that's not the point. Is being able to move things around without having them get so backed up or bunched up that now you have the trickle down effect. Like, well, now I put that on Friday. Now I got to move something off of Friday. You're only going to have a little bit of that. Within a day, though, you want to identify the most important tasks: revenue generation, money, business build, keeping clients happy, prospects happy, or for some people who are in fundraising, saving money, purchasing, whatever it is, it's going to be the best use of your time. So if you were an author, 100% of the time, important thing would be writing. If you're in sales, it's going to be talking with prospects or clients. Depending on your career, it's going to be something that best use of your time. That's where you're an expert, brought all experience, education, talent, and background to the table. And anytime you get to do best, that's where you want your time to go. And so those tasks that represent that forward movement in that area, that's your time spent. Now, you're going to have a few other tasks on your list too. Some might be run-of-the-mill tasks, basic part of your job stuff. And then every once in a while, there's going to be a couple, well, it'd be nice if I could watch that, read that article that Joe sent, or do that HR training, if I can fit that. There's going to be things that are a little bit more fluff, and there aren't going to be many, because basically they're going to be the run-of-the-mill task, and that's going to be common. And then you want those most important ones, those priorities, stand out. Like, hey, if I really don't have 3 hours of disposable time today, and I only have one, what's it going to be? And you want to make it easy to identify, okay, well, then this stuff is going to have to go, because I know just by the way I identified, that's the one to get my time today, because something just came up and now I don't have as much time. And yeah, you do not want a rigid system. You really want that flexibility around, but you have to start somewhere. So I've heard other people say in the past, gosh, I've always been opposed to signing dates of action to tasks. But then when they learn Taskology, they're like, yep, I can see how simple you've made. Now I feel more comfortable.
Sure.
Because I think in other systems where they say, assign a date of action, they also have like a gazillion other things, a lot of other chain roadblocks and things that make it complicated and rigid. And so they kind of associate assigning an action date a problematic thing. No, the one that holds you back. Maybe it was everything else in those other systems that made it more complicated.
Yeah, kind of overthinking. I like that you said you keeping your eye on what you need to do next, pretty much in line to make progress on said thing. So I think the biggest thing that a lot of people, including myself, sometimes experience is task overwhelm, even though things may have dates. Let's say your task list is 200, 160, 150 or something. Sometimes people see that list and they go, I am crippled by the sheer number of things. What do you recommend for that?
Well, in the system that you use, and we can do this in Microsoft, where you can group them by the action date and then literally compress the whole list.
Yeah.
Not entirely, but
yeah,
you can compress it. And then you're only opening up just one day.
The day.
Because you already picked another day for everything else. You don't have to think about it. It's out of your hair. Like, don't even worry about it. It's in the systems where they won't let you group it by action date that it becomes like a digital legal pad, which by the way makes me crazy, because I wish that some of these systems would give you the functionality to let you group it by action date and then compress, because you really only need one day at a time. And that's what solves the overwhelm. That's it. When you can get that out of your vision, then there's no more visual clutter. There's no more overwhelm. You already know you've assigned it. Like, I'm not doing that until next. I don't need to think about it, but it's there. If you need to look at those days and reprioritize, it's there. It's not gone, but it's just hidden. But it's still right there on the same screen. And some will let you.
What's interesting is I run my author creativity this way. And I'll explain how in just a minute, but the rest of my life, maybe not so much. So the best way to describe it is I write by the seat of my pants, meaning I don't pre-plan, I don't plot my stories. I don't pre-think. A lot of it unfolds before me while I'm writing it. And part of this is based on the function of I will know what to write next when I get to it. And I don't have to worry about what's going to happen in the future because it's going to come to me when I get to that. And that works for me. I love it. It's a fun experience. I don't stress about the future of my stories because I know it'll work itself out. It always does. It always has. I've published 8 books now, 9 books actually. So, but then when it comes to my actual life, for some reason I don't approach it in a linear way like that. It's more of like an ad hoc, scattered approach. But it makes sense, right? It's out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. When you put it in this
Right.
linear list, it's going to come back again. You don't have to worry about it because you're going to hit it again. And when you hit it again, you can determine, oh, yes, this is still the right time for it. Or, oh, this isn't as high of a priority as I thought it was a month ago. Now I'm getting to it, just like there needs to be something else, right?
You've got it.
Or I've made a
You're right on
shift. And
track. Yes.
it's funny. It's that linear approach does leave very little room for error when it comes
It's
to
all right
remembering
there.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want to simply be reminded of something, you're just picking that act to go, well, when do I want this again? Even if I'm
Hmm.
not sure that's the right time to take action. Same things happened when we have what I call pending tasks or things you're waiting for from others. There's a
Mm,
huge gap for people. Hey, I
yes.
called Mary, and I have the paper there on the desk, but forgot about it. And here we are 2 weeks later, and somebody's asked me, well, did you talk to Mary? Crap. When did I last call her? Right. And left her a voicemail or something. Right. And so, or you send an email to somebody. Yeah, I totally sent that email to George, but I never heard back from him. Things just are so easy to forget if you don't have a way track of that sort of thing. So in our system, we totally have a way track of things from other people because believe it or not, all of those things actually turn back into tasks for you. Like they're
Hmm.
still tasks, they're not going away. It's just that people might have a paper representation of it, and they get on the side of their desk and kind of forget about it. I used to do that in corporate, actually. I look back on those days and I'm like, yeah, I had the pending pile. And I'd leaf through it every once in a while and go, okay, who am I waiting for? And I'm thinking, God, those were the days, right? 20, 25 years ago. I did that, and now of course there's a much better way. So what you do is, you call that person, you leave a voicemail, right? The task done. So what you do is you make a note at the end of the task. I left a voice LVM for left or SEM for sent email, and then put the date. Just
Yep.
put the date. I did it on whatever date it was. And then you ask yourself, well, how many days am I going to let go by before I
Or
take
ask
action
again.
again? Like I'm going to
Yeah.
give Bob 3 days. I'll give Mary till tomorrow, whatever. And then change the action date and let it fall down the about a day.
Yep. I love
And then
it.
you'll see it and go, that's right, Bob never called me back. Let me take action. And then you never lose control of those kinds of tasks. It's like,
So, what do you recommend in terms of project tracking separately, right? When you know that, do you recommend just having a separate list that's just like this? I'll use this as an example for my author business, right? I would love to run a Kickstarter at some point for one of my future releases. Something I've never really looked into. I don't know anything about Kickstarter. I'm gonna have to learn a lot about it. There's lots of options, books to read, videos to watch, in terms to learn about it. So that's a much bigger project of, okay, I would like to run a Kickstarter. Do you recommend having that somewhere else? Like this is the broader objective, and then just having the single task for what you need to do next in connection to that, or no?
no. So if we were working together and you say to me, Leslie, I really want to do this Kickstarter, I would say, Dan, when do you think great time to really start looking into that? Like the very
Mm-hmm.
first thing you would do, maybe Google something or go to their site and read about how they, like I'm totally making this up. Do you know what the very first, like if you were going to do that today, what's the very first thing? Think like
Probably
if
peruse
we're
and
ready. Yeah.
someone who has done a successful Kickstarter. Go look at their campaign and see how it was structured. Probably
Okay.
would
And do
be
you
the first
know
thing.
of that person? Is this like
I
a
do.
friend,
Yeah.
a colleague?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
someone I already know. Yeah.
Okay. So you would say, call so and so to discuss Kickstarter and how
X
it works.
Kickstarter. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's your task,
Hmm.
by the way. And then I would say, Dan, when would you really like to do that? Like, I get that you won't do it this month or maybe even next month, but is next July too late? You might say, oh, yeah, I don't want to wait that long, Leslie.
Yeah. Hmm.
When give me a month, like just pick one. Like, hey, this would be cool if I
Let's say January.
Great. So we would give it a day DO of maybe January 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever, that first week of January, where you'll see it again. And then, like you said earlier, then I
Is
can
it still
decide,
right? Yeah.
does this still feel right? Or did something else come up that now I've got to put out fire, or I'm working on this project that came up time. Doesn't have to be a fire or an emergency, something else that came up. And then you go, I'll just wait one more week. Or no, I'm going to kick that out to February because that's more realistic. That's all you do. So see, here's the thing. This is why project management does not serve anybody on a personal productivity. Let me be clear. Cool for project, a
Right.
big
Right.
deal.
Right.
I'm not dissing that. Talking about personal productivity here. You and what we need to do in our workday, it's task management. And research shows it's in taking tiny action steps that gives us that steady forward movement that we're all craving in our workday. So you've got a project now that we've just talked through, the very first step you would take, and you can take that in January. So you're not going to hesitate or procrastinate on that anymore, even if, I mean, you might not have, but people do because they're like, oh, that's so big. I can't even think about that. That's
Right.
long term. They say that's long term, as in
Yep.
what that means is I can't think about it right now.
Yep.
So I help people distill it down, and make those decisions so that you feel good. Like, oh, I got a plan wrapped around that. I'm going to take my first step the first week of January. We're going to get this thing started. And then it doesn't feel like a roadblock or that you're kicking the can down the road. So no separate project management list. No need. No need. You can even start the task with the word Kickstarter or KS and then do your dash and then put the task.
Yeah.
So that task is what goes in that subject line. And I tell people, don't break it up. Don't put Kickstarter in the field and then hide everything in the notes section. No, 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 no. That one field gets the
Of
task.
course.
You want that visible from the main screen in order to plan and prioritize. Like you have
Right.
to see it in order to prioritize. Can you imagine having to double click on everything to go, oh, what's that? And then try to prioritize? No, have it in that main field, whatever it's called. It could be called subject. It could be called project. Put the task there. And now you have your first action step on that one.
Yeah, I love it. It makes total sense. Absolutely makes sense to me. I
Good.
know I haven't been putting it off. It's one of those things where I just know now is not the time.
Good.
So
Yes.
yeah,
And
I
other
know.
people totally kick the can down the road. Like, oh, that's back burner.
No, I know, and I know what the first step is, and I already have a plan of when I'm planning on doing it.
Good
So
for you. Good
not
for
too
you. But it
worried
was a
about
great
that.
example to use to illustrate to other people because I'll bet you a lot of your listeners have some back burner projects
Oh,
or some
definitely.
long-term projects or some wishes and dreams. Like, God, I'd love to start that, but I just don't know
Mm,
where to. And it's so big that they just don't even have the room or the bandwidth to think about.
absolutely, totally get that. Well, we could probably dive into this so much deeper. There's like a thousand
Oh my
ways
gosh.
we could take this conversation,
Yep.
but I mean, I've
We can
already
always
learned a
do it
significant
again,
amount.
right?
But now that we're running a little short on time, I'd love to ask, where can people find more information about you, your book, your services, where they can
Sure.
get some assistance?
Visit productiveday.com. That's where everything, so much that we have to offer people. And I would say the first thing is that I can always book a call, like free 45-minute workday breakthrough call. That button is all over our website. So if you ever want to talk about your workday and you want it to work differently, I'm here, first of all. Second of all, I invite everybody to fill out, to take the quiz because the quiz is really fun. It's what's your number one productivity blind spot? It's only
Hmm.
about 8 questions, very diagnostic and fun because on the other side, you're going to find out if you're a giver, a marker, a jumper, or a detector. So
Cool.
take the quiz because you'll get your own unique results. And then a couple days later, you'll get another special insights report just about your particular productivity blind spot, what's really going on in your day, and how to fix it. So that one's really fun. Take the quiz. It's on the homepage. It's also on the nav bar. But we also have the 52 Productive Day Smart Step, and you'll get one audio per week. They're just 4 minute strategies straight from Taskology, and you'll have one every in your inbox if you sign up for the Smart Step. And there is one more special report called the 7 Surprises Saving Time. So all three of those are on the homepage, and I invite you to dive into any one of those to find out more about what's possible.
Very cool. Well, I'll make sure to put all that in the show notes, the links to your website, to the various things. Take advantage. I'm going to do the quiz right now. I'm going to be honest
The
with you.
quiz is
I'm
fun.
I'm genuinely curious to know what it says. So I'm the right audience for that type of
Yeah.
freebie. But
Quizzes are fun.
yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate your time and thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show, Dan. It was great to have a conversation today.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I hope you found that helpful. I know that Taskology it's one of those simple concepts that seems too simple to make any sense, but listening to Leslie, learning from her, hearing what experience she has in her 20 plus years of this program, I can definitely see how she knows what she's talking about. Now, since this interview, I have given it a try, maybe not as in depth as we talk about in this interview, but I will say, fewer things fall through the cracks when I actually take a minute and schedule something with a specific date, which is good for me, right? I'm not always organized in that way, but I will provide more updates over time. I'll give it another month or two, see how I like it, see if it fits for me. Otherwise, check out Leslie's stuff. Now, I look forward to talking to you in a couple weeks or next week rather. I do intend on keeping this once per week. If you have any questions or comments or you'd like to join me on the podcast, head to thecasualauthor.com. Fill out the pitch form. Let me know who you are, what you're all about, and what you're passionate about. I'd love to have you and talk to you about it. So thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you next week.